Hey guys, welcome back to the American Diary. Sarah here. New York City is about to make the most dangerous political decision in its history, and the mainstream media is doing everything they can to hide it from you. Last night, in what should have been a game-changing final debate, America witnessed something absolutely terrifying. A radical democratic socialist with alleged ties to Hamas, currently leading in the polls to become mayor of the nation's biggest city, was completely exposed on live television. His economic fantasies were demolished. His extremist connections were laid bare. His entire agenda was ripped apart piece by piece. And yet, Patriots, he's still winning. Let me paint you a picture of how insane this has become. Zohran Mamdani, remember that name because if we don't stop this, you'll be hearing it a lot, walked onto that debate stage with a smile on his face, confident that New Yorkers would embrace his socialist utopia. He proposed a $30 minimum wage. Yes, you heard that correctly. $30 an hour, not 15, not 20, 30. And when challenged on how small businesses would survive, how restaurants would stay open, how the entire economy wouldn't collapse overnight, his response was essentially, trust me, we'll phase it in. That's not policy. That's fantasy. That's Venezuela-level economic suicide wrapped in progressive rhetoric. But here's where it gets even darker. Andrew Cuomo, and I never thought I'd say this, actually became the voice of reason in that room. The same Andrew Cuomo who destroyed New York's nursing homes during COVID, who resigned in disgrace, who represents everything wrong with establishment Democrats, was forced to attack Mamdani because even he knows how dangerous this socialist agenda is. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, joined forces with Cuomo to expose what Mamdani really represents. It was a rare moment of bipartisan unity, not because they suddenly like each other, but because they both recognize an existential threat to the city they love. And then came the bombshell that the media refuses to cover: Mamdani's connections to Hamas and radical Islamist groups. When pressed on this during the debate, he didn't deny it. He deflected. He talked about solidarity with oppressed people and understanding complex geopolitical situations. That's political speak for, yes, I have those ties and I'm not apologizing for them. This isn't about foreign policy nuance. This is about a candidate who could control the NYPD, who could influence counterterrorism operations, who could make New York City a safe haven for the very ideologies that have attacked us before. The Wall Street Journal called his debate performance rattled. CNN even admitted he struggled to defend his economic plans. Social media exploded with clips of Mamdani stumbling over basic questions about job creation, tax revenue, and public safety. Conservative accounts had a field day, but so did moderate Democrats who are watching their party get hijacked by the radical left. This should be front-page news everywhere. This should be the lead story on every network. Instead, it's being buried because the mainstream media doesn't want you to know that socialism is 2 weeks away from taking over New York City. Here's what makes this absolutely infuriating. Mamdani is still ahead in the polls, despite being destroyed in that debate, despite his dangerous connections being exposed, despite proposing economic policies that would bankrupt the city within months. He's winning because the Democratic machine in New York is so powerful, because progressive voters are so committed to their ideology, and because moderates are too afraid to speak up against the woke mob. We're 14 days away from an election that will determine whether New York City becomes a testing ground for socialist policies in America. If Mamdani wins, every progressive mayor in every city will see it as a green light. They'll push for $30 minimum wages. They'll embrace defund the police rhetoric even harder. They'll align themselves with anti-American movements and call it social justice. And when their cities collapse into chaos, they'll blame capitalism. They'll blame systemic racism. They'll blame anything except their own failed policies. This isn't just about New York anymore. This is about the future of urban America. And Patriots, if we don't pay attention to this debate, if we don't share what really happened, if we don't wake up every voter in that city before November 5th, we're going to watch the biggest city in America fall to socialism in real time. So buckle up. What I'm about to show you from last night will shock you, anger you, and hopefully mobilize you to make sure this never happens.
The reason that we put forward $30 by 2030 is that that's the minimum that a New Yorker needs to be paid to be able to afford to live in this city. Our proposal that we've put forward would be phased in over a longer period of time for small business owners to ensure that they could deal with this.
All right, let's break down exactly what happened last night, because the mainstream media is already spinning this into something it wasn't. They're trying to make it seem like Mamdani held his own, like he's a serious candidate with serious ideas. That's a lie. What we actually witnessed was a socialist's agenda crumbling under the weight of basic economic reality. Let me put this in perspective for you. Right now, New York's minimum wage is $15 an hour. Mamdani wants to double it in 5 years. Do you know what happens when you force businesses to double their labor costs overnight? They don't just magically find the money. They cut staff, they automate, they close down. Small restaurants, corner stores, family-owned shops, they can't compete with big corporations that can absorb those costs. This isn't helping workers. This is destroying the very jobs he claims to protect. Think about the mom-and-pop diner in Queens that's been there for 40 years. They have 5 employees making $15 an hour. That's $75 an hour in labor costs, plus payroll taxes, plus benefits. Under Mamdani's plan, that jumps to $150 an hour. Where does that money come from? Do prices double? Do customers keep coming when breakfast costs $30? Or does the owner just fire 3 people and force the remaining 2 to work twice as hard? This isn't theory. This is math. Basic, undeniable math that Mamdani refuses to acknowledge. And the Wall Street Journal, not exactly a radical right-wing publication, even they couldn't ignore how ridiculous this proposal is. Listen to what their editorial board member said during the post-debate analysis.
Zohran does have socialist theory colliding with practical reality.
Socialist theory colliding with practical reality. That's the perfect way to describe not just this policy, but Mamdani's entire campaign. He lives in a fantasy world where government mandates solve everything, where businesses are just endless sources of money, where economics doesn't exist. But here's the thing, reality always wins. Always. And when reality hit Mamdani on that debate stage, he didn't have answers. He had talking points, he had slogans, he had nothing. You know what else he didn't have? A response when Cuomo called him out. Andrew Cuomo, the same guy who destroyed nursing homes during COVID, who resigned in disgrace, who represents everything corrupt about establishment politics, even he looked at Mamdani's plan and said, "This is insane." When you've lost Andrew Cuomo, when even disgraced Democrats think you've gone too far, that should tell you something. Now, before we go further, Patriots, if you're tired of the mainstream media hiding these truths, hit that subscribe button right now, ring the bell, share this video with everyone you know in New York City, because they need to see what's really happening before they vote. We're building a community of truth tellers here at the American Diary, and we need every single one of you to spread this message. We're 2 weeks away from an election that could change America forever. Don't let them bury the truth. All right, let's keep going. So Mamdani's economic plan is a disaster. We've established that. But that's not even the scariest part. What really should terrify every New Yorker, what should terrify every American, is who Mamdani aligns himself with. During the debate, when he was pressed about his connections to Hamas and radical Islamist movements, he didn't deny it. He deflected. He used the classic progressive playbook, talk about solidarity with oppressed people, mention complex geopolitical situations, use academic language to avoid giving a straight answer. Let me be crystal clear about what this means. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization by the United States government. They've murdered Americans. They've attacked Israel repeatedly. They've openly stated their goal is the destruction of a democratic ally. They use civilians as human shields. They store weapons in schools and hospitals. They celebrate when Israeli children are killed. This isn't a complex geopolitical situation. This is terrorism, plain and simple. And Mamdani, who could be controlling the NYPD in 2 weeks, who would have access to counterterrorism briefings, who would be responsible for keeping 8 million people safe, has expressed sympathy for these groups. Not sympathy for Palestinian civilians caught in a terrible situation, which is something compassionate people can discuss. Sympathy for the organizations themselves, for the ideology, for the movement. When this came up in the debate, you could see him panic. His whole demeanor changed. He started talking faster. His answers got vaguer. He looked uncomfortable in a way he hadn't been all night. And the Wall Street Journal's analyst picked up on it immediately. Listen to this breakdown.
You saw him reiterating critiques of Mamdani's lack of experience, his friendliness with Hamas and radical Islam in Gaza, and those were really having Mamdani rattled. He's usually very slick, but he seemed to be a little bit uncomfortable. Very same thing with Curtis Sliwa. The question is it too late now? A lot of New Yorkers are about to start voting.
Rattled. That's the word that keeps coming up in post-debate coverage. Mamdani looked rattled. And you know why? Because he's not used to being challenged. He's used to progressive media lobbing softball questions. He's used to rallies where everyone already agrees with him. He's used to Twitter echo chambers where dissent gets you blocked. He's not used to someone looking him in the eye and saying, explain your Hamas connections. Explain how you'll keep this city safe when you sympathize with terrorists. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, he didn't hold back on this either. Sliwa's been warning New Yorkers for months that Mamdani is dangerous, that his foreign policy sympathies make him unfit for office, that putting someone with his views in charge of the NYPD would be a disaster. Last night, Sliwa got to make that case directly to voters, and Mamdani had no response. He stuttered. He changed the subject. He talked about housing policy when asked about terrorism. But here's what makes me absolutely furious, Patriots. Despite all of this, despite being destroyed on economics, despite his terrorism sympathies being exposed, despite looking completely unprepared for the responsibilities of this job, he's still winning in the polls. He's still the front runner. How is that possible? How can a socialist with zero executive experience, with dangerous foreign policy views, with economic plans that would bankrupt the city within a year, be leading this race with 2 weeks to go? The answer is simple, and it's the same answer we see in every blue city across America. The Democratic machine is so powerful and progressive voters are so committed to their ideology that facts don't matter anymore. They don't care that Mamdani's minimum wage plan would destroy small businesses. They don't care about his Hamas connections. They don't care that he's never actually accomplished anything meaningful in government. All they care about is that he checks the right progressive boxes. He talks about equity. He talks about justice. He uses all the buzzwords that sound compassionate but have zero substance behind them. And the media, the media is doing everything they can to help him win. CNN barely mentioned his worst moments from the debate. MSNBC is already spinning it as a spirited policy discussion. The New York Times wrote an entire article about the debate without mentioning Hamas once, not once. They're protecting him because they know if voters see the real Mamdani, if they understand what his policies actually mean, if they hear about his radical sympathies in detail, he'll lose. So they're hiding it. They're downplaying it. They're hoping you don't pay attention. This is why independent media matters. This is why channels like The American Diary exist, because the mainstream press has completely abandoned any pretense of objectivity. They've chosen sides. They've decided that protecting progressive candidates is more important than informing voters. And if we don't fight back, if we don't share the truth, if we don't make sure every voter in New York City sees what really happened in that debate, Mamdani will win. And when he wins, Patriots, New York City becomes the blueprint for socialist takeovers across America. Every progressive mayor in every major city will look at New York and say, if they can go full socialist, so can we. Los Angeles will push for a $30 minimum wage. Chicago will embrace anti-Israel foreign policy. Seattle will implement rent control that destroys housing. Portland will defund police even further. And when those cities collapse into economic chaos, when businesses flee, when crime explodes, when municipal budgets implode, Democrats will blame capitalism. They'll blame systemic racism. They'll blame climate change. They'll blame everything except their own failed policies. We've seen this movie before, and it never ends well. Venezuela was the richest country in South America before socialism destroyed it. Now people are eating zoo animals to survive. Cuba tried it 70 years ago. They're still impoverished, still oppressed, still fleeing to America on rafts made of trash. Detroit tried progressive policies for decades. It went bankrupt. San Francisco embraced progressive governance. Now there's human feces on the sidewalks and businesses are fleeing. Every single time these policies are tried, they fail. Every single time. And yet here we are in 2025 watching New York City, the greatest city in the world, the financial capital of the planet, about to elect a socialist mayor, and half the country is acting like this is normal progressive politics. It's not normal. It's radical. It's dangerous. And we have exactly 14 days to stop it. So what do we do now, Patriots? What's the action plan here? First, if you live in New York City, you need to vote. I don't care if you think your vote doesn't matter in a blue city. I don't care if you're tired of politics. I don't care if you think all the candidates are bad. This election matters. This is the moment where New York decides whether it wants to be a functioning city or a socialist experiment. And if you don't vote, if you sit this one out because you're too busy or too cynical, you have no right to complain when your taxes skyrocket, when businesses close, when crime rises, when the entire city collapses under the weight of progressive policies that sound nice but destroy everything they touch. Second, spread this information. Share this video with everyone you know in New York. Post it on Facebook. Tweet it. Send it in your group chats. The mainstream media is burying this story because they want Mamdani to win. They've made their choice. But we don't have to let them control the narrative. Every person who sees this video, who learns about Mamdani's real agenda, who understands what's actually at stake, that's one more informed voter. That's one more person who might think twice before checking that box. That's how we fight back. Third, talk to people. I know it's uncomfortable. I know political conversations can get heated. But if you have friends or family in New York who are planning to vote for Mamdani because he seems progressive or because they don't like the other candidates, have that conversation. Show them the debate clips. Walk them through the math on the minimum wage proposal. Explain what happened with Venezuela, with Cuba, with every other place that tried socialism and failed. Don't be preachy. Don't be condescending. Just present the facts and let them decide. Because here's the reality, Patriots. If Mamdani wins, this doesn't just affect New York. It affects all of us. When the biggest city in America embraces socialism, it sends a message to every other city, every other state, every other progressive politician that this is acceptable. That economic destruction is acceptable as long as you call it equity. That sympathizing with terrorists is acceptable as long as you frame it as solidarity. That incompetence is acceptable as long as you have the right ideology. And I'm not willing to accept that. I'm not willing to sit back and watch America's greatest city fall to radical leftism without a fight. I'm not willing to let the mainstream media gaslight us into thinking this is normal. And I'm betting you're not willing either. That's why you're here. That's why you watch channels like The American Diary instead of CNN or MSNBC. Because you know something is deeply wrong with the direction this country is heading. And you're looking for the truth. So here's what I need from you. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any updates between now and Election Day. We're going to be covering this race closely, bringing you the stories the mainstream media won't touch, making sure New York voters have all the information they need to make an informed decision. Leave a comment below and tell me, do you think Mamdani can actually win? Are New Yorkers paying attention to what's happening? What would you do if you were a voter in this race? I read every comment, and I want to hear from you. This isn't just me talking at you. This is a community of patriots who care about America's future, and your voice matters. Share this video everywhere. I'm serious. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, text message, wherever you can reach people. Get this information out there. The media has 2 weeks to bury this story. We have 2 weeks to make sure everyone knows the truth. Which side wins depends on how hard we fight. And look, I get it. Some of you are thinking, Sarah, this is just one mayor's race. Why does it matter so much? It matters because ideas have consequences. It matters because what happens in New York influences what happens in Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, and every other major city. It matters because if socialism wins in New York, it becomes the template for the entire progressive movement. And it matters because we're running out of time to stop this before it spreads everywhere. New York City has survived a lot. It survived September 11th. It survived the financial crisis. It survived COVID, even with Cuomo's disastrous leadership. But I don't know if it can survive a socialist mayor with no experience, dangerous foreign policy sympathies, and economic policies that would make Marx blush. And I don't think we should have to find out. The choice is clear. The stakes are clear. The timeline is clear. 14 days until Election Day. 14 days to make sure every voter knows what they're choosing. 14 days to save New York City from itself. I'm Sarah. This is The American Diary, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and whatever you do, don't let them silence the truth.